Welcome to Data Visualizations 101, and we're going super analog for this workshop. I'm going to close this 2-day data workshop training with doing something that's absolutely just analog, hands-on. I am Umi, and this is Alex, my co-presenter. And we will take you through the next, 75 minutes, not 80 minutes or so.
All right, so I will introduce myself. I'm Alex, and seems like all the screens are gone. Okay, they're back. So I work in the mayor's office for the innovation team, and we're sort of an in-house consultancy focusing on big kind of issues in the city. And in my spare time, I like to make data visualizations, charts, and graphs. Some who are on the Twitters and Instagrams of the world may have seen me, probably not, but I go by I Got Charts if you want to follow me. I probably at this point only 1 out of every 10 posts or charts, so it's a little bit misleading. And yeah, that's all I have to say right now, but you'll be hearing from me a lot more in a minute. I'll pass it off to Umi.
Hey, I'm Umi. My pronouns are they, them, just so you know. So I have an academic background and spent a ton of time in graduate school studying music and digital cultures. And so what you see here is actually a depiction of the future at the turn of 20th century by a French artist, sort of imagining the future of learning. And as you know, there are sort of all kinds of questions about how we learn, and School of Data is about learning. And in this picture, just out of curiosity, what do you think is wrong here? Yeah, we should get that on the recording. So speak into the camera, yeah. I mean the mic.
They're all guys. They're all men.
Yeah,
The professor or teacher is taking a very passive role. They're just putting the books in, but it appears another student is like actually cranking the wheel.
Yeah. So I think I like to use this as illustration of all things that could possibly go wrong in learning, especially in the age of digital. So what I do at the City of LA Department of Cultural Affairs is to sort of create kind of a new organizational culture that invites people into the process of learning to develop new prototypes and tools, knowledge systems, to be able to be equipped and be informed in doing what they do. So in a way, I kind of take the role of my job title is a digital strategist, and the strategy goes into kind of capacity building as well, and that's why I'm here today. So I'm going to just kind of lay out a few sort of objectives for today, and then we're actually going to get pretty hands-on for today's session. A few learning objectives. All right, this is a funny one. We're going to learn how to make more than a pie chart. And this was something that Alex really requested, more than a pie chart. So we'll see if we can get there. In responding to that, we're going to sort of visit a diversity of approaches to display information. So we're going to get into lots of other chart types. So you're going to walk away with like a nice handout of chart types. And then I think, everything that I do, I always talk about how it's important to think about who's your audience, who's your reader, and to kind of think from their perspective. So we'll bring that into the mix just so that we can be more effective in communicating with our audience in mind. Lastly, is that we want to just make sure that everyone here has a sense of how every visualization has a sort of a built-in perspective, and that it is actually, for the most part, the most effective charts tell a story from a perspective. So we're just going to walk through how that can be done. Okay, so this is kind of a provocation. I don't know if we'll be able to like really answer this question by the end of the 80-minute period. But how do we move people with data? And to ask this question too, what is the visual power of information? So I like to sort of take a step back and sort of think big about what information is and what it can do. I love drawing this analogy. I teach at the USC Marshall, and business analytics students, and then they're super acquainted with data and spreadsheets all the time, like they can like do really amazing things with R. But like when it comes to like concepts about data, they're still kind of like, eh. So since we're in the room with managers, and I know that all of you all will not probably end up making the charts yourselves, some of you will be, but I think, it's important to kind of know sort of the principles, and then to be able to sort of have an astute kind of way to discern what's a good chart from a bad chart, but also kind of know sort of the power of what a chart can do, so then you can push people that you work with to work toward that. So, okay, what you have in front of here is a piece of paper. And that's what data is. Like raw data is really just a piece of paper. It's like, okay, this is origami paper. But origami paper comes with a lot of potentials for what it can be. It needs to be transformed. Right, so in working with data, there's this process of folding, unfolding, and then sort of building together, and then to create something that is in the mind of someone, an archetype, right? I mean, this is an archetype of a dragon, and archetypes are sort of culturally constructed, right? So like there are all these sort of visual meanings that we use as data visualization people to be able to speak to the archetypes of the people, right? Red means certain things, urgency, right? So yeah, it takes a bit to kind of construct it, turn it into something that can speak to people. And ultimately, I think, we don't just want a chart that's an archetype. We want it to actually speak a message. So in this case, there is a kind of a story here, right? Surprise. There's a sort of sequence, a narrative. It's a tiny loop of a tiny video, but there is something. So this is why we talk about the importance of a data story, because we want it to be moving. We want it to sort of be a discovery process for the reader. So then they can see something and learn something, and by the end of it, come out of it with a different set of knowledge. How do we do that? Today, we're going to go through sort of 3 basic ways of doing something to visualize information. Prioritizing information, arranging it, and then contextualizing it. And for each one, there's a little exercise. So prioritizing. Okay. How many of you know what that's about in the picture? Speaking to the mic, please. Anybody? Go ahead.
This is Marie Kondo, right?
Marie Kondo. What does Marie Kondo do?
So she is sort of reorganizing, or helps families sort of reorganize and tidy their spaces, and to sort of only choose the things that are relevant, or, as she says, sparks joy for each person, right?
What sparks joy?
Right, yeah.
I've been waiting to say that all afternoon. I'm not sure if we can just deal with data that's joyous to us. But yeah, no, precisely this point, I think economizing, right? I mean, I think, the first thing that Marie Kondo does, this tidying up expert, right? The domestic organization expert, is to really think about what needs to be there and what does not need to be there. And the way she does that is to ask the people who live in the house what sparks joy. And, I think our question is not so much that, but it's what's important? What's an important message to convey here? And I think, this gets at the concept of visual economy, which is how we cognitively operate, right? Our eyes, are really powerful organs. We've taken lots of stimuli, almost too much, right? Colors, textures, lines, patterns. But how do you move the eyes to the things that are important to you, the things that you want your reader to pay attention to? And so the way we do that is actually, we have to create a visual hierarchy. So here's an example of a clutter. So this is kind of the data example of my closet, right? What's wrong here? Do you mind sharing through the mic? Too many lines, yes. So there is the teal line, and there's also the backgrounded sort of grid lines, right? It's hard to differentiate the front versus the background. Yes.
If everything is dotted, nothing is.
That's right. You have too much of the same, right? The pattern is the same, the texture is the same. So we don't know what we're looking at, what to pay attention to. There's no differentiation. So this, is kind of a contrast from that, right? I mean, clear lines, graded lines are in the background, and we can pay attention to the peaks and valleys. Okay, so Marie Kondo wants us to put things in order. And order is the beginning of a visual message. And so when we're talking about visual messaging, it's really, I think that order, the idea of order is based on one's intention. It's that intention regarding the value, like what's the value of your data set? What's the messaging you're trying to get, and who's your audience? And there's usually what we like to call hierarchy of information. We like to rank the information. So then, so you can make things that draw kind of the differentiating points between foreground and background, left to right, top to bottom. So when you're building your visualization, you want to think about the hierarchy of your information. Think about these questions. What's important to you? Who's your audience? And what do you want your audience to take home with? Okay, so we have an exercise for you. And Alex is going to walk around and pass out a handout. So what we've got here is a data set. It's a visual data set with animals. And so imagine this as like a table, right? Each table has information regarding an animal type. So there are two kinds of information here. One is type, right? There are three types, right? There is a cat, there is a dog, and there's a horse. These are archetypes for sure. The cat kind of looks like a Hello Kitty. It's missing a few whiskers, I think. Okay, so our eyes can do really, really effective things in parsing and counting. And this is exactly what machines do, but machines are way faster at it. But we're going to slow down the process, and I'm going to ask you to do it. So pick out all the dogs and count the number of dogs. You can do this on your own. You can work on it with a partner. Oh, well, on your own, that's fine. So we have a few minutes just doing this.
And as you go through it, note really how long it takes you, how easy it is to kind of spot a dog as you go through everything.
Is anybody done? Whoa!
All right.
Did the donuts help? Coffee.
Anyone want to answer? All right, yeah. 19. And about how long did that, do you think it took everyone to kind of count the dogs?
2 seconds.
All right, he's an exception. 'Took me about 12.
12 seconds?
About 12 seconds. Now, this is our only handout, but if you could kind of look up at the screen now and just see how the experience is different in counting the dogs if this is what you're presented with. People think that faster? Now, we'll go back a step and add a frog and a goat. And now imagine we're not going to keep adding animals, but imagine there were 50 animals. Or instead of animals, we were showing 50 different cities. Or any other variable that we want to be able to tell the difference of. And here again, it's a lot faster. Now we'll do a little variation on this one now. So on this one, we're gonna look at a cat. So the cat is trying to get home. And on the right side, one of those lines connects to the cat and is home. So you could take a second, see if you could determine the line. Home is on the right side. One of whatever line connects to the cat. Right. Now, how does your experience change if you now need to do it? So what we do here with the color is, in some ways, it could make it more clear because every line's delineated. But as you could see, some of these lines, well, actually, you can't probably see because there's a yellow line somewhere in there that's almost completely invisible. You have a couple lines that are similar colors. So in ordering information, color can help, but it could also sometimes confuse things a little more than it has to. Now let's try one more. So there you have right immediately, you sort of know. So what this is all an example of is really kind of the pre-processing that we do every time we look at a visualization. You may not even realize that you're sort of doing it in the background, but if you're trying to get a point across in your data, if you see an obvious pattern or you want to highlight a particular geography or a particular program, it's helpful to keep that in mind, that when people look at the information, a lot goes on before you're even necessarily conscious of what's happening. Equally important is really how we arrange all of our information. So visual meaning, it can manifest itself in a lot of ways. You could have one set of numbers and you could choose to highlight different aspects of it. You could take the same exact set of data and look at it in many different visualization types. And so what you have to ask yourself in kind of choosing what the best visualization is really, what colors are you going to choose? What are the meanings of the colors? How do you differentiate the information? How do you create a shape that really best tells the story that you're trying to tell? There's a lot of ways of sort of showing information. A lot of times it depends on what your underlying numbers are, but a common thing to show is quantity. So we want to say, is this bigger than that? Equally important is the question of space, especially if we're trying to show something in cities or show the relationship between two different sets of numbers. Seeing one versus the other is important and gives us meaning. Third is that we might want to track something over time. We may have a program that we instituted and we had something that we did before, and we want to really see, has what we did, has our intervention actually improved anything? Being able to see something over time is highly effective doing that. Or you could kind of combine all of this together. So to give you a couple quick little examples here, on the left, we have an example of just purely quantity, looking at population density amongst 3 different countries. In the middle, we see space, and here we're looking at different parts of downtown Los Angeles and the surrounding areas, and how many, on each block, how many jobs there are. In the case of time, to be honest, this is actually not showing any underlying data. It's just a line, but we could have it show anything we want. We could say this is the rise in mortality of a certain disease over time. And the combo allows us to take not only one variable, which in the case above with time, we're seeing the prevalence of the disease, but at each of those points also shows something else. So let's say each dot is the spending that went into a program to address this particular disease and how that's changed over time. And so what we have here are some example chart types, and we have this in a handout. And this is a small sample of charts. There's hundreds and hundreds of different chart types out there and variations of these. But to take you through a few of these and kind of what they're most useful for, we start with the line chart. That's really one of your most basic forms, and that's really good for showing the change over time. With an area chart, we could see not only how things have changed over time, but change among parts of a whole. So if we're looking at differences in budgetary spending by categories over years, we'd see. The next two are forms of bar charts. Now, you could really use either of these. The one on the left is just a regular bar chart or a vertical bar chart. The one on the right is a horizontal bar chart. Often a regular vertical bar chart uses ordinal data. So each kind of bucket has some order to it. So in this case, we have different age groups. Whereas a horizontal bar chart, there doesn't have to be any real relationship at all between any of the variables. Again, we're back to our horse, cat, and dog. Now, you may notice our next chart has a big cross over it, an X, which we'll go into in a little more detail in a minute. I don't make any secret about how my feelings towards pie charts. I don't enjoy them. And there are a few reasons why. I'd say the biggest one is that, especially, and we'll see an example of this in a moment, if you have a lot of different variables you're trying to compare, it is extremely hard for the brain to compare little slices that are not analogous shapes. So as an alternative, our next chart here, the stacked bar, does two things, and there's other alternatives to pie charts. So we could just say only look at DTLA. And in there, we're basically comparing a rectangle to a rectangle. But it also, with the stack bar, allows us to do that with many different categories at once. And you could also do that with time. There's any number of ways that can be ordered, but it allows you to show quite a bit more information in a small space. Next up is a scatter plot, which is really the best way to show two variables next to each other to see if as one variable moves, the other variable moves. If we raise gas tax, will people drive less? That sort of thing. And finally, we have a box plot, which allows us to take a single variable, a single dimension variable, like let's say age at which people first, I don't know, eat pizza. Or anything that could be on a scale, and you want to show how does the distribution of that look. With the box plot, we're able to see all along the y-axis, so all up and down, where each one of these lines is where the median is of that data. And then the top of the box is the 75th percentile of the data, the bottom of the box, the 25th percentile. And you're able to get a lot of information about really the shape of the data, where are the peaks and valleys without having to plot it in a histogram, which is another type, but this is a more kind of economical way of doing it. So that's just a handful. Now we'll take a break for pie charts for a minute, and this is a pretty extreme example of a pie chart. I would say if you do use a pie chart, if there's 3 variables, you're probably going to be okay. In this case, I think we have 30 different variables. And so what I'd like to see if everyone could do, if you could take a focus on U and V here. And based on this, if anyone could say which one of these is bigger, who thinks that U is bigger than V? Or maybe they're the same size. Conversely, you could show the same data on a bar chart, and we have U and V, and you could see that V here is a little bit taller than U. So now that I've given everybody a crash course in exactly what charts are, you get to make your own. So we're going to start pretty basic, and I'd say don't get too much confidence after this exercise, because the second version of this is going to be quite a bit harder, but not to scare you, not to scare you. This will be a good warm-up. So in this case, we're going to consider a talent show. And in the talent show, there are 3 different animals competing in the show. We have 7 dogs, 9 cats, and 3 horses. So in groups of, say, maybe 4 or 5, something like that, 3 to 4, we're going to hand out some materials, and based on any of the visualization types you have in front of you, even a pie, just have to, you know, had to give kind of my disclaimer, but I'll still like you after, I promise. Or if you have some other way that's not kind of shown here, and you just think this would be another good way to show the data, that's fine too. Really, there's no exact rules here other than somehow represent these three data points.
Okay, so I'm just gonna do some logistics. So if you all don't mind getting into 6 groups, so that's like between 34, maybe 4 people per group, and then we'll come around and give you the supplies, and yeah, it's pretty, and we'll show you the rest. So okay.
Let's see here.
"45 seconds. Get ready, data chefs. You're gonna have to present."
What did they say in Project Runway?
What did they say?
Needles down or something?
Needles
up. Needles up. Yeah.
In 30 seconds. Break out the glue sticks. Hey, you have to commit. To share out, and then all right, cool.
Take it through, and
I will do that.
We'll
I have some questions for them.
throw everybody in the deep end.
Mhm.
Exercise
Yep.
2.
All right, 10 seconds. Okay, markers down, scissors down, glue stick down. We're done. Tape, tape down. All right, so we're gonna ask you to share out, and in the sharing, basically tell us why did you choose this chart type, and what is your visual strategy? Okay, let's have this group go.
Yeah.
And if you don't mind talking into Mike, I think it would be helpful, if you don't mind.
We don't know how many people, but there are people.
There are people live streaming this, yeah.
Listening and watching us, so it'll help them follow.
Hello, everybody. Sorry. So this is our chart. We chose a bar chart because this was going to be the best way to kind of display this data based on we had simple categories and simple numbers. It is to scale. So everything corresponds. So that was kind of our first approach, is making sure that it was accurate in its visual representation. So this is out of this line, these are each a percentage of the height. And then we went on a search for a purple one so that this information would kind of be displayed to the back and wouldn't be overpowering. So sorry. And then we got really rushed at the end and we used orange because in the previous session they mentioned that was like a high contrast color, so it would stand out. And then we specifically ordered, like we picked green because they were the best colors that went together out of the felt we had, but we didn't put we tried to kind of order it nicely, I think. Any other comments?
We chose the dark green for the highest number, just so that that's where the attention would be drawn to, since it is the highest. And then as it sort of, the numbers drop down, the colors also get lighter.
Great. So on that one, they do a very interesting thing with the actual color of the bars. And we'll look at it in a second. Now, in this case, the color corresponds to the number, but you also could use color to show potentially an additional variable. So not only count if we had more information. And or you could make every bar the same, but being able to focus on color in a particular order, or in a way that and we'll see maybe in some other groups that if one of those, if the colors were too similar, or if one color jumped out too much, it could convey meaning without necessarily you wanting to convey meaning. In this case, I think is a good example of conveying exactly, you know, what the data say.
Is that the second group go?
But we debated for a really long time until we decided that our data story, we started with our data story, which was that wanted to tell, which was that horses are just woefully underrepresented. So, and our audience was the talent show, the people who run the talent show, so that they would know that, like, you know, horses just aren't coming to this thing. So, and the idea was, right, exactly. Well, but we didn't know. It's like, maybe that's by design. Maybe horses pay less to enter the contest, so maybe you don't want a lot of horses. I don't know. But they needed to know what the representation was. And so we went with a really bold color for this because we thought that would sort of jump out, like you could easily see that horses aren't showing up. And for other kinds of learners, we also had the visual, like so you could see what the horses were, so that if you could immediately figure out what was what. And then we had numbers for people over here, and we matched the numbers at the last minute with this because other people stole our numbers that were cool.
And not just visual, but a previous visual reference. These, yeah, yeah.
Nice touch. And notice that instead of using bar the same width to see the quantitative differences,
Right.
they decided to play with height and stack them.
Right. And in that, you can see kind of the proportion.
Right,
the
the percentage.
Within the whole talent show, how do all of these relate to each other in a slightly different way than they were just regular bar.
That's just
Static bar.
yeah. We have this group on this.
First of all, I want to compliment, she said woefully underrepresented. Whoa, of course.
Oh, pun, didn't even hear myself.
So this is our chart. We tried to convey the value of everything by using linked colors and just basically a bar chart. And you don't need an axis if you convey the value as well as the proportional styles. By having both English and the symbols, then we're trying to reach a larger audience by not having language be a barrier. And I drew a horse. So, anything you guys want to add?
The accessibility point is really important. I think, you know, there are sort of color considerations that are crucial here. And
I think that there are also like linguistic ones, so, but yeah, we can talk. You want to go next?
No.
I
have a question for you.
Oh, yeah.
A very quick one. In this, in terms of accessibility, do you have any special tips for disability? Because there's certain colors or certain numbers that you can use or not use. And I tried to look for that in PowerPoint or things like that, but it's quite difficult to, I don't know if you have any.
I would say in general, high contrast is good.
Yeah.
And that works with binary. So if you have like two different things, very different sort of textures or color. And if you're working on a screen, the digital sort of colors, there are actually guides out there. There's legal websites that you can use. Color schemes.
Yeah, there's a great one that I use all the time called Color Brewer. And Color Brewer, it shows you color schemes for if you want to use color to show a variable, to show darker is more, lighter is less, or vice versa, or qualitative. And there's an option on there that you could set it so it's colorblind safe, or if it's printer, if you don't have if you only have a black and white printer, it'll change the palettes around. So that's a really helpful one. But there's a few. It's called Color Brewer. Yeah. So you just I think
Like
it's
brewing a beer?
right. Yeah. I think it's colorbrewer2.net, but if you just Google Color Brewer.
So it tells you. I think in a previous presentation, someone said blue and orange or high contrast.
Yeah.
Purple,
Right.
yellow, orange. I'd say yellow black has become kind of a standard for ADA.
But that's Steelers and we're Rams. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
let's just don't get it.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, culturally.
And a Bruin, oh no, sorry, I'm the only Bruin.
Red and green are often, if you're doing colorblind, those two are easily confused.
Okay, confused.
Red and green.
And green and blue also.
Green.
Yeah, red, pink,
It is a cultural thing, because when I was studying in Spain, we were in marketing class and somebody created something for difference from the Catalans to the other. Like, no, that's not our, we don't take to that. So,
Right.
Well, it's 'cause
Kellogg
colors of
had
the
created a whole new breakfast cereal with the colors that was really offensive to this particular.
So everything you put on a chart has meaning, and sometimes that meaning's not good, depending on knowing that perspective.
Thank you.
Yes. You don't mind sharing into the.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
The mic, I suppose. So this is our charts. Everyone. Sorry. Oh, yes. Okay. Thank you. So this is our chart. We decided to use thinner bars so that you can see the differentiation between the different amounts easier. The thinner the bar, the larger the appearance of distance between the two. We do have a 0 to 10 scale. We put the numbers on top. We correlated the colors to the bars so that there's consistency and it's easier to read. Additionally, if you are colorblind, you can always see the numbers on top, even if you can't differentiate the colors between the different bars. We put the title, which was something that we were like, in the last minute, we're like, oh yes, the title is probably important because otherwise what are we doing? And then we put a little reference at the bottom, basically saying when the data was created or used. It's based on February 2019 data provided by the City of Los Angeles. So that everybody knows, because there may have been more pet talent shows in previous years with different data. And if we had different data, we could have shown like if there's a trend in horses removing themselves from our talent show. So yeah, that's ours. We put the horse, dog, and cat at the bottom so that people could see, but we didn't unfortunately draw the pictures. But that's ours.
And clearly cats rule.
Yeah, cats are taking up a lot of the
the energy in the room.
They
Yeah.
are talented. They are talented.
It seems that there will be many donkeys in 2020.
Thank you.
Okay, we took everybody's advice. We didn't have enough time to do our data source, but we would have if we had more time in our title. We did a graph bar. We used the orange because somebody said it's higher contrast. We had the pets, the pictures of the pets in the bar. We used pink because you said Hello Kitty, and that's all we could think of. Right, and because it's gonna be Easter, we try to use those Easter colors. Anything else? The hot dog? Okay.
That's good. That's good.
And that's it.
Now, for your group as well as the other group over here, I've noticed that, did you give thought to kind of how the bars are ordered?
You know, it took us forever because we wanted a ruler. We wanted to make sure that it had the same width, the same length. So yeah, so what we did 2 fingers for each number. So yes, we gave it a lot of thought.
How about this group here? Do you decide how they're?
We made the same decision to make sure the larger one is from left to right.
Is there wrong and right?
No, there's not a wrong and right. Well, in a case, it's better practice to have the numbers either go low to high or high to low. If we just kind of jumbled it and nobody did here, if we just threw the 3 in the middle, that would be a little confusing. So there's no real right or wrong if you want to have the data ascending or descending.
Would it be depending also on what you want to highlight? Like say it's, you know, I'm looking at the total number of expenses or something. Like I want the management to see if this department is actually have the highest. So you kind of want to do that. I think it depends on which one really you want to highlight. And, you know.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
In that case, we could have, if we can imagine that we want to make an algorithm to have a machine making the graph in the future and you have way more data, we could have imagined that we put 793 in the order of the it came in the frame, you know? You know what I mean? We all organize the data ascending, descending, but imagine we have 500 data and we just put the data in the order of because
right.
The data you gave us was not ascending or descending, it was mixed.
Right. So you could choose to sort it a particular way. You could choose to represent the way exactly how you received it. All of those choices also convey meaning.
And I think in general, like if you rank it, if you put it in an order of quantity, it's people's eyes are going to draw to the beginning or the end, the leading or the trailing. So that's just something to consider. And if you're trying to draw attention to something in the middle, then maybe a color choice that makes it pop could be your strategy. So we should move on to the next slide and keep this going because we have one more exercise for y'all.
So I'll talk fairly quickly for these since we want to make sure you have enough time with the next one. But going back to kind of the idea that the chart maker decides really kind of what to show and it's representative of a perspective, there's really no better kind of example for this than a map. So a map is a sphere. It's representing a sphere in 2 dimensions. So as a result, something has to be distorted. And you have to make decisions of where you distort it. So what we see here above is just the world already in a particular projection. So there's already bias built in there. And different projections historically have different biases. I believe this one is a Mercator, which was initially meant for ships, so they could just follow a straight line all the way across on a compass. But a lot gets distorted The size of Africa, for instance, is very small. Below, we see different perspectives, all based around Los Angeles. So the first is a perspective of all of North America. The second, we have a perspective of just the US. The third, California. And then the last is Los Angeles. So it's centered around that point, and everything the further you go from it gets distorted. Now, when we take data, it may have one variable, like what we were just looking at a minute ago, or it could have a lot of different variables. And showing multiple variables in one, again, trying to take 3, 4, 5 dimensions and see it in 2 dimensions can be a big challenge. And so one technique that is very useful is to not only look at space, but also consider color and size. So this chart here shows in different cities across the United States, police officers, and the size, considers the size of a city and how many officers within the city there are per square mile, how many people there are per officer, the city population, and then the size of the sworn police force. So on our x-axis here, it's the people per officer. The Y, we have officers per square mile. Then the actual color, the darker the color, the more people live in the city. So we see New York here is the darkest, followed by Los Angeles. And then finally, the actual size of the circle is how many officers are in the sworn force. So you could get creative with how you show different variables. You could also add in a 5th variable and have different shapes. So there's a lot of different ways of doing it that are not always necessarily just kind of right there and then obvious. You can get pretty creative and show a lot. Which brings us to our final exercise. Oh, we have some more talent show information for you. Not only that, we have different years for the talent show. We have talent show. We still have 3 animals. It's still dogs, cats, and horses. So goat fans out there, sorry, we'll have to wait for the next iteration of this. And then we also have counties. And so we're going to hand out a few things to help you with this. Now, you'll see that we have animal type, count, county, and year. So that's 4 different variables. You can, the only restriction on this is to show more than you show last time. So if you want to focus on all 4 and somehow representing all 4, that's okay. And to that end, we have a map template to hand out of our 3 counties. You could show county and year. You could take the data and create an average for the county. There's no right or wrong here. Just if you can, try showing a little more than you showed the first time.
Okay, so logistical, we're going to ask you to use the back of the foam core board that you were just using. Just trying to save paper here. And I'm going to come around and pass this map template for you all if you're interested in doing a geospatial kind of visualization. This could be your template. So, and then there's more color felt if you want to sort of think more strategic about color for this next round.
And one little hint I'll give as you come across the numbers and you realize that the count here, we have hundreds of animals at sometimes in these talent shows, and we don't have tons of numbers to put on the axis, is that you could always, instead of saying 1,000, let's say, you could use a 1 and just say 1K, or 1H in this case for hundreds. So we can, you don't have to spell out every single number as exact. Abbreviations can do a lot.
If you want to do
We got 2 minutes. We got to really wrap it up. Okay, 2 minutes, 2-minute warning.
And if you can't make it through everything you have planned in these 2 minutes, that's okay. Just you could talk us through kind of the roadmap of where you're going with it. But as much as you could do in 2 minutes.
Kick us out. So
No.
it's just nice to be able to wrap.
Yeah. You don't want, and then we start 5 minutes late. Friday. Yeah, I like the dot approach.
The dot approach is nice.
Yeah, it's
a little tedious over there. I noticed the 3 markers. It's great.
Yeah, they're really
They're going at it.
make a time lapse of them.
Right, that's a good idea. Yeah.
One minute warning. 1 minute.
Hey, this is.
Chart makers, you have 30 seconds.
Yeah, we could stop. There's an orange marker. What are you using? Oh, what are you using? No, not enough orange markers.
You guys wrapped up?
Almost.
Okay.
Almost.
We want to get out of here right now because the security team can't go home.
Oh, you're kidding me. All right, we're gonna wrap.
Okay, we are officially wrapped.
We have to get out of the building, but if you'd like to join us, we're going to Imperial Western. Imperial Western at Union Station. It's a lovely bar with dollar oysters, and they make their own beer.
Nice.
Off the train across the street. We're gonna go scrub it.
Great. Cool.
And there's still more donuts.
All right, great.
We're not gonna be
Should take like 2 minutes
Yeah.
to be able to share.
Yeah.
All right, so we have to wrap up, but we do want to hear from you quickly, or at least any volunteers. Any volunteers who want to talk through kind of your process or what you have, even one. Sure.
Please share. Yes.
Group in the back.
Hi. I went rogue from my partner. Sorry, I decided to go on my own. I created smaller cutouts where the numbers are on the y-axis and the years are on the x-axis, so you can see the slope of the increase or decrease in the count of the animals per year there's no legend here that says that the dogs are purple, the cats are pink, and the horses are red. That would be somewhere if I had more time. And then overlaid it over into the county maps.
Nice.
I only had time for one county, the next one, and then the next one, you know, if we. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's an important point with legends. So if you're using a lot of colors, legends are a great quick little guide. Colors for different size, what a size kind of relates to. You could label too, but we haven't really covered legends, so good thing to keep in mind.
We have one more.
Okay, one more presenter here. At least one more. All right.
A scatter plot. We had included a title this time, something we learned from the last. And we also included a legend, blue for dogs, horses, and orange, and pink for cats, and we made sure to put the dots in the same order for each of the different counties, right? So, and we tried our best to make that accurate to the count, so we ran out of time. So, but it kind of gives you an idea.
Good.
That's really good.
Great. Thank you. I think we have one more. All right.
I don't know. I will be able to explain that. So you have to imagine that you have these work 3 times. So it's a staggered chart, stack bar. Each color is a kind of a pet. So the purple is a horse, for example. You can see the evolution of horses in 2016, 2017, 2019, as well as you can see the total number of pet participating to the talent show. You can see the evolution from 491 in 2016, 2065 in 2017, 339 in 2018. The legend is with letters and with a little drawing for kids accessibility, and so just imagine that with more time you can do it 3 times for 3 different counties.
Great. Well, thank you all for coming out. Hopefully you learned a little something about visualization and what to focus on, maybe not focus on. Thank you all very much.